The Black Cave Disaster. Thomas Edward was lying at home in April 1995. He had an idea and told his wife about it. He wanted to go to the Black Cave in Arizona. He was very hopeful because he had explored this cave before. He took only a miner's lamp and entered the cave. He fearlessly walked along the same path he had traveled before. Suddenly he noticed another passage. Should I enter here? He asked himself. Perhaps hoping to make the discovery of the century, he entered that passage. This passage he had just begun was getting narrower and narrower, but Thomas Edward kept moving forward without hesitation. Perhaps in his heroic sense of being an explorer, he was not thinking rationally. As time passed, the humidity in the cave increased and movement became difficult. He realized he could go no further and decided to turn back, but the humidity and darkness confused his mind. He lost his sense of time. He kept moving left and right, but could not find the exit. At that moment, his lamp flickered and went out. Everything became more difficult. He was left in the middle of the darkness. He was able to provide light for a while with matches hidden in his shoe, but it was so humid, the matches quickly ran out. Now he was left with only total darkness. With a clever plan, he left the unnecessary items with him as road signs, in order not to return to the same paths again. After a while, tired, hungry, and thirsty, he reached an area called Fissure. It was a narrow crevice, only 10 centimeters wide. He tried to enter with his feet, hoping that maybe this was the exit. His feet went in, but his buttocks got stuck. He tried to move to get out, but without success. He was trapped inside the narrow crevice. It seemed impossible to get out of here. The only thing he could think of was to scream. Maybe a miracle would happen and someone would find him. For days he waited in the cave, without food or water. He was completely drained of energy. Who knows what he thought those days in the deep darkness. Thomas's wife was very worried. She immediately called the police and explained the situation. The police launched a search with special teams. But there was a problem. Thomas hadn't told anyone which cave he was going to. This put the police in a difficult situation and wasted time. After meticulous police work, the cave where Thomas's car was found was identified. Preparations were immediately made and they entered the cave. As they went in, they found some of Thomas's belongings, such as his shirt and glasses. This was good news, but the police had failed to notice the secret passage. Incredibly, Thomas was still alive. After days of fruitless searching, the team withdrew from the cave. His wife didn't give up. She called for a new search and rescue operation. Missing persons notices were placed all over the city, but to no avail. Hope was lost. Thomas's remains were found in December 1996, 1.5 years after the incident, by 3 people exploring the cave. Incident at Megawell Cave. January 13th, 1991 was an ordinary Sunday. A 3-man cave exploration team decided to go to Megawell Cave in Alabama. The leader of the team was John. John was a seasoned caver with 10 years of experience and was very confident. The other 2 people accompanying him were Linda and Charles. Although Linda and Charles were not very experienced cavers, they wanted to enter this cave, and they trusted John. Their plan was to enter the cave, explore it by descending 310 meters down a large waterfall, and then return. After the preparations were completed, the team arrived in front of the cave. The rope in John's hand looked a little old. Linda asked him why. John said that he had bought the rope from a Polish caver and had heard that it could hold 2 tons of weight. However, due to the recent heavy rains, the water level in the river flowing into the cave had risen considerably. Despite this, John said they could go ahead, trusting in his experience. So the team entered the cave. They decided to descend from the right side of the waterfall and started to prepare. The waterfall was so high that there was a strong roar coming from below. John went down first, using the rope they had brought. The waterfall was completely wet, and the descent was quite difficult. Once down, John checked the rope. Then Linda carefully climbed down the rope. It was Charles's turn. Charles was a bit worried because he weighed 119 kilos with his equipment. He started down very carefully and checked the rope. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he made it down the waterfall. The team had difficulty hearing each other because of the roar of the falls, but this did not stop the expedition. They started to pass through narrow passages. They were running out of energy as time went on, but they pushed on for 45 minutes. Linda was starting to feel cold and asked to turn back. The team agreed and headed for the exit. Actually, they were all cold in this environment. Time seemed to pass very fast inside the cave. When they reached the waterfall, John and Linda climbed up the rope. John took Linda to the car and told her to warm up. Then he went back to the cave to get Charles, but Charles still hadn't come up. John tried to make his voice heard, but he thought it didn't reach down because of the noise of the waterfall. He waited in fear. 20 minutes passed and John began to panic. When he pulled up the rope, The end was cut off and empty. John examined the situation with astonishment. He hurried out of the cave and ran to Linda. He told her the situation. Linda was in shock. They didn't have their cell phones with them, so they got into the car to call for help. They stopped the first car on the road and asked for help. Then they hurried to a caving equipment shop and bought a sturdy new rope. They returned to the cave. John left Linda at the cave entrance. Linda was to meet the arriving rescue team. John took the rope and went inside. He looked down into the dark cave. He hoped that maybe by some miracle he could see his friend. When he couldn't see anything in the dark, he quickly lowered the rope he had just bought and started to descend. His heart was beating fast. He tried not to think negatively, but psychologically he was not well. As she went down, she began to see Charles, but Charles was motionless. She went to him and checked his pulse. It was horrible. There was no pulse. All her fears had come true. He looked at his friend for a long time, blaming himself. But these accusations didn't change anything. Desperate, he climbed up again. When he came up, the rescue team had just arrived at the cave. John told them about the situation. The team started work immediately. They worked in the cave all night long. At 7 o'clock the next morning, Charles's lifeless body was pulled out of the cave. The investigation revealed that the rope John had bought from the Polish caver was not strong. At the end of the investigation, that caver was arrested. Cruise Cave disaster. On the morning of May 15th, 1982, 3 friends set out to explore Cruise Cave in California. The team consisted of Alex, Mark, and Ethan. All 3 were experienced cavers. But Cruise Cave was unlike any place they had ever been before. When they reached the cave, they prepared all their equipment and went in. As soon as they stepped into the cave, Alex felt a fear he couldn't describe. He didn't know why, but he didn't tell his friends about this uneasiness. He didn't want to worry them. Inwardly fearful, he began to move forward. As the team went deeper into the cave, they had to pass through narrow passages. They came across a section known as the torture chamber, the most difficult part of the cave. This was the narrowest and scariest part of the cave. Due to the structure of the cave, going down was easy, but going up was a great risk. They decided to move forward by taking this risk. It was getting harder and harder to breathe. They felt as if they were suffocating with every step. Finally, they crossed the narrow passage and reached a small room. They were very tired and hungry. In this small room, they rested for a while and filled their bellies with the canned food they had brought with them. They wanted to recharge their batteries. During dinner, Alex finally told the team about his restlessness. At first, Mark and Ethan laughed it off. Alex didn't say anything more in the face of this reaction. Even though he was scared inside, he couldn't leave his friends there and go back. The team was about to set off again when suddenly there was a buzzing sound coming from deep underground. It was as if a creature roared beneath the ground. Immediately, there was a violent tremor. It was a 6.1 magnitude earthquake. Rocks were falling on them from all sides as they tried to stay on their feet. It was a real nightmare. But when the tremor ended, all 3 of them were alive. They were just covered in dust and rocks. The fear in Alex's eyes deepened. They decided to turn back without wasting time, because every second counted now. The walls of the cave were loose and could collapse at any moment. After they had traveled for about 5 minutes, there was another earthquake. This time, the magnitude was 5.9. Again, they faced their fears. Fortunately, no one was hurt again, but Alex's fear grew even greater. "Don't leave me here," he shouted in panic. Mark tried to calm him down. "Okay, we won't." Finally, they came to the place they feared the most, the torture room. It was so narrow that it was almost impossible to breathe. They just wanted to avoid a concussion on the way out. Mark and Ethan were leading the way, and Alex was right behind them. Just as they were making their way through the passage, the ominous sound was heard once more. Immediately afterwards, another earthquake struck, this time with a magnitude of 5.7. Screams of fear and panic mingled with the sound of falling stones. Everyone was trying to hold on to something. The earthquake lasted a long time. Meanwhile, the boulder Alex was holding onto broke loose. He lost his balance and fell straight into the torture chamber. When silence fell, Alex's voice was heard. "Help! I'm stuck." There was so much dust that it was almost impossible to breathe. Mark and Ethan quickly tried to free Alex. They dangled a rope to him and tried to pull the rocks away, but to no avail. Alex's voice was getting weaker. "I'm sorry, you have to go," he said with sadness in his eyes. Mark and Ethan tried for hours, but to no avail. At the end of 6 hours, in desperation, they had to leave Alex there and left the cave to call for help. After a great effort, they managed to get out of the cave and immediately called for help. After about 10 hours, the search and rescue team pulled Alex's lifeless body out of the cave. Stickman, be happy if you subscribe and like the channel.